You're listening to Podketeers.
Welcome to episode 262 of Podketeers. What do NASA, 3D printing, Adam Savage from Mythbusters, and Gavin all have in common? Well, keep listening and you'll find out. Plus, in this episode, we also talk about who in the Disney company, past or present, we would like to sit and have a conversation with. We'd love to hear who you would like to sit and chat with, and you can do that by joining the conversation on Instagram, Facebook, or on Twitter. Just search for Podketeers. You can also leave a comment on the blog post for this episode at podketeers.com/262. Quick note, we all had prior obligations on our regular recording days, including a couple of us going out of town, so we recorded this episode prior to some great news about the Main Street Cinema, so we'll be touching on that in the next episode. If you like what you hear and you would like to help us grow, a great way to do that is by becoming part of the FGP Squad. The FGP Squad are our podcast Fairy Godparents, and it's their support via Patreon that help make these episodes of Podketeers possible. If you would like more information on how you can become part of the FGP Squad, just head over to podketeers.com/FGP. As always, a huge thank you goes out to the FGP Squad for their support. If you'd like to help out the podcast but can't join the FGP Squad, it's okay. We have another great way to help. The next time you need to buy something from Amazon, start by going to podketeers.com/Amazon and clicking on the large Amazon button. That will take you to Amazon's homepage using our special referral link, and anything you buy will earn us a small commission as a thank you from Amazon for mentioning them on this podcast. If you're already doing this before your purchases, we'd like to take this opportunity to thank you as well. And that is going to wrap it up for this intro. So let's do this podcast thing. Here is episode 262 of Podketeers. Yeah, let's just get it done. Let's do it.
All right.
You guys do that? I'll bring coffee.
Yes. All bases covered.
Right.
That's funny. This is totally not Disney related, but I just thought it was super, super cool. Did you guys ever watch the movie Hidden Figures?
Yeah.
Oh, not yet. It's on my list, though,
Okay.
for sure.
It is a fantastic film. If any listeners don't know what the film is about, it's essentially about the women that worked at NASA and were kind of the quote-unquote human computers that essentially helped astronauts and all of the engineers and scientists land on the moon and go into space for the very first time. It highlights Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, and there wasn't a lot of representation for them around or at NASA. And this last week, I saw NASA posted on their Twitter account that the street in front of their building is now called Hidden Figures Way.
That is so
That's
cool.
awesome.
I thought that was such a great homage to them, because now, I mean, for the people that saw the film, they obviously understand, how much and how intricate they were to get us into space. But I mean, just the fact that they use that name and everything, I think it symbolizes so much. I think it's a very positive thing, and I like the fact that they did that.
That's so cool. Where was that? Was that at the Kennedy Space Center, Johnson?
Great.
Where was that?
Let me see.
Do you know?
It was in the article. Hold on. Where's the headquarters?
I believe the headquarters are at
Washington,
the Johnson
right?
Space Center in Houston, I think is where the headquarters are.
I think it's in Washington, though.
They may have their main office in Washington.
Yeah.
That's true.
I think
that's true, yeah.
I think it's the one in Washington where they put it up. I could be mistaken, but
pretty awesome.
I will
then.
double check, and if I need to correct that, I'll put it in the blog post. But yeah, what a great homage. So glad that they did it, and congratulations.
Very, very cool. It's interesting. I've had the chance to talk to several NASA employees at my current job because we sell them 3D printers and 3D printing plastics all the time.
Up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I sold some just this week to the Ames Research Center here in California. So,
dude, that is super cool.
Yeah, every every industry, most specifically every aeronautical and military entity whatsoever, is using 3D printing, because it is definitely one of the things that's the wave of the future.
Do you by any chance know if it's 3D printing for modeling purposes, or are they actually using them for parts to replace things that are broken?
Yeah, most of the time 3D printing is going to be used for prototyping.
Okay.
So not finished parts, but there are some parts that are definitely being printed and used directly.
Oh, nice.
For example,
Wow.
in like the FAA has approved certain parts of commercial airplanes to be 3D printed out of certain plastics.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and so basically, if they're not a part that shows like to the passenger, like that, doesn't need to look like all perfect and injection molded and slick and all that. If it's just purely a functional part, then I mean you can 3D print almost anything.
Like buttons on the control panels?
Sure. Yeah, actually we sell
Wow.
there. So this can go. We can do this loop forever, by the way, because 3D printing is being used in every application imaginable. But you say that, and it triggers in my mind. We sell to a pinball machine restorer who replaces the translucent buttons that have lights that go behind them on pinball machines.
Wait, so you can
So-
3D print translucent stuff?
Absolutely.
What?
100%. Yeah, dude.
This is cool. This is
Yeah.
fascinating.
Oh my god, I'm so excited right now.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
you can basically ask, can you do this with 3D printing? And I will say yes and have a story about it no matter what it is.
That's awesome.
So,
I'm glad you
yeah.
said that, and I'm glad you brought this up because I have a bone to pick with you right now.
oh my gosh, this is about a certain suit, isn't
Here's
it?
the deal.
Uh-oh.
So you're so excited about being able to print all this cool new stuff with your 3D printers. But as I recall, you still owe me an Iron Man suit. Okay.
Do
Here
I
it
owe
comes.
you? Like I
We,
owe
we
you
talked about
this?
this. You said you were going to give it to me. You were going to make one. You were going to size my fat head. And then we were going to somehow make all that stuff happen, right? And Adam Savage seems to have beat you to the punch.
Adam Savage has mad resources, bro.
He does. He does. Adam Savage, of course, of Mythbusters fame, is back on Discovery with a brand new show called Savage Builds. And, in one of the episodes for this brand new show, he builds an Iron Man suit.
Yeah.
Fully functional. I mean, not fully functional because he can't fly and, he doesn't have repulsors and all that stuff. But it is an Iron Man suit that was 3D printed. Now,
It's pretty dope.
Now, it's not the first time that he's tackled something like this. Back in 2012, I want to say, he built the original Mark I Iron Man suit, the one that Tony used to get out of the cave in Iron Man 1. But the fact that this one was all 3D printed is really what made me think, what's the holdup, Gavin? Where's my Iron Man suit?
Well, and just to continue the theme, my employer has worked with a couple of Mythbusters as well.
What?
Whoa.
I'm telling you, it goes on and on and on.
Okay.
Yeah, we sell to most of the major studios for prop making. I mean, 3D printing is everywhere.
Speaking of 3D printing, I actually might need your help creating a replacement part. This is why I was kind of asking about the NASA
sure.
thing, because you guys know I'm big on trains, right? Love the Disneyland trains and everything. Love Carolwood over at Walt's Barn, Griffith Park and stuff. I have an old train that I received as a gift a long time ago, and one of the pieces that spins the wheels broke, and so it won't move now because there's nothing to project or propel the wheels forward. So I have a feeling that if I can 3D model it, that if I 3D print one, I can, because this train isn't made anymore. I can't just buy parts for it. And so I figure that if I made a 3D version of it, I can give it to you and you can print out the part that I need and get that train functioning again. Because it's cool.
Heck yeah,
you add the
dude.
little oil to it and everything, and it puffs smoke and stuff. And
I love that.
I love it. And so I want to kind of get that train rolling again because I miss having a tree with a Christmas tree, with a train
Sure.
around it and stuff. And I
Sure.
want that this year if we can make it happen now.
Yeah, we can cook something up, I'm sure.
It'll be good because I can have the train.
If you can find schematics for it specifically, that would be great. Or depending on how recently it went out of production, there might be
12
3D files.
years ago.
Yeah, not likely then.
Yeah.
But
That's why
you
I'm
never
thinking I
know.
might have to take the other piece, measure it out, and then model it myself to give you the 3D
Yeah.
file.
Have you, this is so freaking tangential at this point, but have you looked at Thingiverse?
Yes, I have. And
And it's
I
not
looked at
there?
it. Well, I haven't searched for that part in particular, but I have
Okay.
searched there for other 3D models of stuff, primarily a lot of Disney model stuff that I wanted to
Oh,
try
of
to
course.
recreate.
Of course.
And yeah, I mean, I'll double check and I'll check a couple of the train forums that I know of, but it's so old that I don't think I'm gonna find it anywhere. But I mean,
Okay.
I know my way around 3D software, so I mean,
Sure.
I could also just measure it out and build it, which isn't a big deal to me. And because the part is pretty flat, there aren't a lot of grooves or anything to it. I think it'll be simple enough that we'll be able to replicate it fairly quickly and easily.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
So now that we've bored everybody, thank you for indulging us on this talk about 3D printing. Oh, dude, I'm sorry. I got to mention 3D printing one more time, but now I'm going to tie it into Disneyland.
Sweet. Okay.
Who is the model maker on Instagram that you sent me who's building the 3D models of things in the park?
The one that I sent you, I believe, was, I think it's just called Mini Haunted Mansion. He did an entire mansion building from Disneyland, like 360 degrees all the way around from
What?
actual schematics, from Disney schematics, printed the whole thing. He was going to enter it into the D23 Design Challenge, but decided not to. And it is unfreaking believable. I think he's currently now working on the Disney World version.
Oh,
Wow.
my.
It's amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
Dude, the model of the Haunted Mansion is so
Oh my God.
spot on.
Right?
And
I'm looking at it right now, and it's like,
mind-blowing,
what?
right?
yes.
So
Yeah.
if you guys want to go check that out while you're listening, Mini Haunted Mansion on Instagram. If you want to check it out, I'm also going to put it in the blog post for the episode over at podketeers.com/262. And oh my, it is amazing.
It
It
has electronics in it. So there's a shot about 5 rows down. If you go to the profile right now, that looks like
Yeah.
it's just a nighttime shot of the mansion at the park. But no, that's his model. And he just dropped trees and a night sky behind it.
Ugh.
It's freaking amazing.
I love it.
man.
Now, here's the deal. Everything looks
Wow.
amazing, but if he built that little mailbox that's in the back,
Yes.
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 Oh, yes. I should ask him if he did that.
that'll be like
Oh.
the piece de résistance. I'm sure
Yes.
I butchered that, but that's as close to French as I can get since I don't speak French.
I dig it.
So, anyhow, I guess that's how we can wrap 3D printing back into Disney. If people are still listening by now, since we're talking about building, it looks like Disney received some permits from the city of Anaheim in order to start building out the Marvel expansion. And what's most interesting about it is that it looks like it's going to have a microbrew.
Nice.
Yeah. Look, California Adventure already has alcohol, right? So
Right.
it's not that far-fetched to think that there's going to be alcohol inside of this Marvel-themed area. But the fact that they're building an entire microbrew in that area is most surprising to me, because it looks like there's also going to be like a full featured Marvel shopping experience, kind of like World of Disney, but Marvel themed inside of there for you to make purchases. It's not something that Bugs Land really had before. I mean, in a weird way, Bugs Land I know wasn't an afterthought. I know that it was thought out, and the original theming with the tractors and the caterpillar machinery and everything that was there when it first opened was one thing. Then, we got Bugs Land. But the way that it was set up between Hollywoodland, or back then when it was Tower of Terror, now Mission Breakout, and the way that it kind of weaves into Cars Land, or that, that turn that connects the back of Grizzly Peak with Cars Land, it just felt hidden. It just felt like it was kind of an afterthought, right? So this area that Gavin has very lovingly dubbed Stark Park, and I'm on board to name it this. If we can have a giant fountain in the middle with just Tony Stark in all his glory just standing there. Oh, we can have like the arc reactor, little homage, proof that Tony Stark had a heart.
Yes.
Oh,
And on the bottom, it's going to say, I love you 3000.
oh,
There you go.
I will start crying.
I always honestly kind of envisioned a Walt-style kind of a partners statue, but with Stan Lee somewhere in there.
Ooh.
That's what I would like to see.
If we're going to have a partners-like statue, it's going to have Iron Man and Spider-Man.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I know. All the feels, right?
Dang.
So yeah, the fact that this microbrew is coming, I think, is super exciting. What do you think they'll do as far as theming is concerned? Because they are promising that they're going to have some Marvel-themed drinks like they do in Batu at the Cantina. You want to throw out some drink ideas?
Dude, let the armchair drinkaneering begin. Oh man, they could go wild with this. They could have like a Stark Teeny, because he's gonna be drinking something like that. Golly, there's so many ideas. Like you could have a Thanos Infinity Gauntlet style goblet, like an Infinity Goblet filled with a Long Island iced tea style cocktail with a liquor for every Infinity Stone. Like you could just go nuts.
That's
right?
Cool.
Like I think, man, they could have a lot of fun. You could have shots for some of the characters, like a beer flight for Captain America.
Yep.
Like they could go. I just have a million ideas just thinking about it for the first minute, and like knowing what they did at Lamplight Lounge with some of their themed drinks and what they did at the Cantina in Galaxy's Edge. I like that they get creative. You go to most bars and they can make you the basics, like the art of bartending is kind of a lost art in many ways. So I love that Disney kind of gets really creative with their cocktails, and they've got some really fun stuff, some really fun looking stuff. And I think that's a big deal with alcoholic drinks is if you can make it fun looking, it adds to the experience. So man, I think they could go all the way with this. The Stark Teeny would have to have some sort of a glowing cube in it, like all of the
tiny arc reactor.
A lot of the specialty. Yes.
I'm so on board with this.
Oh yeah, I tell you what, I think that's a great idea. I think that DCA could use another spot like that because those things are popular, and sometimes it can be a little hard to, enjoy some of those spots. So having one more, I think, would kind of spread out the accessibility.
Yeah.
And it's in a new area for that kind of a thing too. So I don't know. I'm on board for it. I know that certain people aren't as big a fan of having alcohol at the parks, but I feel like they do a pretty good job of managing it.
Yeah.
I think bad behavior is extremely rare at the park due to alcohol, and I think that's because they do a good job of managing it. So to me, it's just another type of magic you can experience at DCA.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I think will remain to be seen is whether or not they'll let you leave with your drinks the way that you can in other locations at California Adventure, because for those of you that have been to the Cantina in Batu, if you tried to leave with your drink, they told you have to drink it here. You cannot
Yeah.
leave with the drink into Galaxy's Edge. So that's one way of regulating it. And considering that California Adventure already is open to alcohol and you can walk around with a beer cup, I'm wondering if they're going to regulate it like they did in Batu, or if they'll let you just kind of walk out with whatever you get as a drink. I guess most of it might depend on whether or not it's going to be served in a plastic cup or a glass, like a beer glass or something, considering that it might also have food, right? If it's a microbrew, it might also have food to complement the drink. So not a lot is known about it. Obviously, the area is going to be opening in 2020, so I'm pretty sure that we're going to get a lot more information at the D23 Expo this year, which I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to be able to go to, by the way.
What?
I realized that I have a prior commitment that weekend that I'm now trying to figure out if I can move or skip. And I'm kind of afraid now because it might determine whether or not I go to the expo this year, and I'm kind of bummed out about it. So I'm frantically trying to figure out what to do now.
Man.
I know. Anyway, before we jump into our main topic, I do want to remind you that this episode of Podketeers, like all others, is brought to you by the generosity of our podcast Fairy Godparents, who like to call themselves the FGP Squad. For information on how you can become part of the FGP Squad, you can head over to podketeers.com/FGP. This month, we're giving back to the FGP Squad. And so on Patreon, we will be posting when our first giveaway will happen. So FGP Squad, that announcement is coming for you. Look out for it as a post on Patreon. Again, if you would like to join, you can get a little more information on the FGP Squad and a link to join at podketeers.com/FGP if you want to be eligible for any of those giveaways. To all of the members of the FGP Squad, we just want to say thank you for all of your continued support. Let's have some fun. I'm looking forward to these.
Nice.
Let's jump into this week's topic. This was an interesting topic idea. I really like this because we've talked about this before, and we wanted to share some of the people within the Disney company that we would want to sit down with, have lunch with, either that have passed or are living. If we had the opportunity, who would that be? So as we're talking, we'd love for you to think about who you would like to sit and chat with and have lunch with and just Disney nerd out with. Now, before we start, I think the one ground rule that we would want to set is, obviously, we would all want to sit down and have lunch with Walt Disney, right? I think that's a given. Can we agree on that?
We can agree on that.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's take Walt off the table. He'll be the one person that's off limits, considering that I think everybody would want to sit down and have lunch with him. Let's do this roundtable style like we normally do, like armchair Imagineering and that stuff.
Sure.
Who wants to go first?
I'll kick it off.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so I've got a list that kind of covers most of the major eras of the Disney company. The first person I'm going to mention is an actor of Disney films, and to me it's one of the quintessential, like, most Disney-esque people in film. I feel like when I think of Disney film, one of the first people I think of, and that is Hayley Mills.
Oh, wow.
I adore Hayley Mills. I love her films. I love her charm and charisma on screen. She, to me, has all of what that first original golden era of Disney film, like, brought us. Just that wonderful romance and charm on screen. And to me, she's like the flag bearer for that. So I've always had a bit of a crush on Hayley Mills, even when she was Miss Bliss for Saved by the Bell.
I was going to say, unfortunately, my first introduction to Hayley Mills was not Disney related. It was technically Good Morning Miss Bliss / Saved by the Bell.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of fond memories of Hayley Mills. So she is my first choice. I think she would make for lovely lunch conversation.
That's a good
Thanks.
choice.
Yeah.
I'll go next. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So I was really thinking about who I would want to talk to that is essentially not mainstream in the Disney company, but would be able to tell me some amazing stories. And so my list does comprise of people that are mainstream and can tell you amazing stories, and we've heard from before. But the first, two or three that I wanted to mention are almost forgotten. Part of the reason I want to bring them up is because these people I chose partly because of the NASA announcement, the Hidden Figures announcement. And so the first person that I think I would want to talk to is Tommy Lorene Wilk. Now, if that name doesn't sound familiar to you, it is because Tommy was joined the Walt Disney Company in 1958, and she was the Secretary of the Exterior. So basically, she was Walt's personal secretary from 1958 to 1966.
Rings a bell.
Yeah.
Her character comes out in Saving Mr. Banks.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
She is the one
Yes.
that you see in Saving Mr. Banks. So Walt always
Nice.
considered her like the sassy one, right? That would stand up to him and just kind of like never take guff from Walt, essentially. But Tommy was one of the people that kind of helped establish how things went on in the studio. So she was normally the one that would get the calls from other employees or cast members, and they would often ask, hey, is Walt in a good mood? And that's kind of where the ball got rolling with Walt's got his wounded bear suit on. And so if you ever heard that, you knew not to approach Walt because he was in a grumpy mood. One thing that I think isn't really known about Tommy is that when Mary Poppins was in production, Walt was originally considering Bette Davis for the role of Mary Poppins.
Wow.
But because the book talked about a middle-aged woman, Tommy suggested Julie Andrews. At the time, she was appearing on Broadway in Camelot. So Walt went and, he watched her and was blown away. And so we ended up with Julie Andrews as Mary Poppins because of Tommy's suggestion.
Nice.
I feel like there's a lot of stories like that she would be able to tell us about Walt and his time in the studio that I don't think are necessarily heard, So she would be one person that I would have loved to sit down and just eat lunch with and just listen to stories about Walt in the studio.
Nice.
Yeah, that she could tell you some stories, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So my list kind of is within the company and within the parks.
Okay.
Okay.
And I actually like that you mentioned Tommy because who I would love to have lunch with is Iwerks.
Oh,
Yes.
Because I've always wondered, to be like a fly on the wall when Oswald and Mickey were being drawn and created. Just to sit down and chat with him. And, we hear the stories of how they were created, but to hear like the in-depth, the raw emotion behind that, I could sit down and listen to someone talk. If they're going to give me a history of something I'm really passionate about, it could be fascinating.
Yeah.
To hear the recounting of how it happened, how they went through, and if he wants to vent, because I'm sure there was some times where it's like tough. So I think it'd be fun to like sit down with him and just hear him out and just let him talk. I mean, I think it'd be really cool.
Yeah.
I agree. He almost made my list. I had a hard time not including him, but yeah, I totally agree. He's so quintessential to the foundation of the Disney company, and he was, I would kind of consider him the first wizard that the company employed. He became the master of all the special effects, and I mean, the guy was just talented beyond belief. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not just with Disney, right? Because technically, when left Disney, he went on to work for Leon Schlesinger Productions, otherwise known as Warner Brothers.
Right.
So that was kind of the beginning of that company, and so he had a hand in the golden age of television for that side of animation as well. So I think hearing the stories of the compare and contrast between the different cultures and how things were developed and how they all kind of came to be, I think would be super interesting. So that's an
Yeah.
awesome choice, Mel.
Totally.
Thanks.
All right, back to me. Basically, the rest of my list are creators. It's no shock that I love the artists and Imagineers most of all in the Disney company. They're the ones that inspire me the most. So this next one is a current Imagineer, one who has been the head of many mega blockbuster endeavors throughout the world. World traveler, art historian
I know
extraordinaire,
where this is going.
We both have smiles on our
earring
faces.
collector of earring collectors, none other than Mr. Joe Rohde.
Yes.
Nice.
The stories of adventure and exploration and creative challenges that Mr. Rohde could regale one with could probably keep you busy for 100 lunch dates. And to me, he is one person who is still right in the thick of it. He is in leadership in Imagineering. He led the way for the entire Animal Kingdom park in its original inception. He led the way for Pandora, World of Avatar. So many other projects within the parks around the world. And I just enjoy his passion and his excitement for what he does and the way that he can contextualize it and show you where all of the influences come from.
Yes.
From the world of art, architecture, civic planning. Like, his knowledge base is insane. He is one of my favorite Instagram accounts to follow because I learn something from him with every single post.
Everyone.
So, yeah, it's amazing. He gives you a little professorial nugget every day. It's incredible. And, the fact that he's been doing it so long and, that he can reimagine something like Tower of Terror and turn it into Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout and achieve the success of that is incredible. And I know that none of these guys work alone. Like, he isn't the only person that does these things, but it's his creative leadership that drives the boat when he's in charge of a team. And yeah, he would be so much fun to sit down with. And I mean, I think the ultimate bucket list would just be to go on a trip somewhere with Joe Rohde.
Right.
Right?
Let's go to Tibet,
Be
just
like,
go with
Gavin,
Joe
are you
Rohde.
ready? We're going to take a red eye. 2:45 in the morning.
Yeah. He's like, leave your bags. I packed this one for you. We're good to go.
What's in there? A pair of underwear, a toothbrush, and a bottle of water.
Yeah. A sack of gold to barter with. We're going with nothing else.
That's funny.
Like, I feel like he's an embodiment of that. What is it? The Adventurers Club or whatever?
Yeah.
All the characters that unite all the parks, right? I feel like he's kind of like a living version of one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like every day would be an adventure. How
I know.
it would never be a boring moment ever with him.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I would love to get to work with him.
Yeah, I mean, Joe is certainly one of those people that is just passionate about what he does, and it clearly shows in the way that he posts about things. And like you said, his knowledge base is just unmatchable by most. And just the fact that his zest for life, I think it comes through in every one of those posts, and how much he just craves knowledge and wants to do those things justice when he wants to share that with the world. Because it's one thing to share a photograph, but when he's building these locations for people to visit, I mean, he really wants to make sure that you feel like you are there. It's not just a replica. He wants you to be there. And it's,
Yep.
I know he didn't specifically work on Galaxy's Edge, but that's what we talked about, right? The comparison we made was when people go to Pandora, which is one of his major projects, you feel like you're on Pandora. You don't feel like you're anywhere else,
Yes.
from what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I admire that about him so much.
Totally. And the fact that he gives props where they're due every time. And did you see his post congratulating the people that worked on Galaxy's Edge?
Yes.
No,
It was just
I
so
didn't.
genuine and so like well thought out. Like he thanked every level of personnel that worked to make that land happen, all the way down to the janitorial staff and the just the cast members. I mean, yeah, he's awesome. He just seems
That is awesome.
very genuine, and I am inspired by him all the time.
But yeah, I mean, look, Joe Rohde has actually snuck himself into some attractions around the world. So technically he is part of that adventurers club that you were talking about, because the likeness to Harrison Hightower in Tokyo.
It's true.
I mean, technically he is part of that club for all intents and purposes. So anyway, Joe Rohde was on my list, but I felt like there's a handful of names on here that I feel that at some point in the rotation, one of us is going to say. So I have other names that I'm going to talk about, because he was on that short list too, right? So technically, of the 4 or 5 that we wanted to discuss, I have a list of 10, because I know we have similar likes as far as some of these people that we would want to talk to. So I scratched off Joe from my list because, it would be pointless to mention him again.
Got it.
So cool. So I'm actually going to keep the same trend that I talked about with my first pick. And it's going to be someone else that worked very closely with Walt. This name actually might be a little bit more familiar to most of you listening, and that person's name is Hazel George. Hazel George was Walt's nurse. She was in charge of his therapy sessions, and there was a lot of things that, Walt would tell her in confidence, and because they had such a good relationship, I'm sure that she heard a lot of things that other people didn't get a chance to hear, right? And there's one quote from Hazel George that I think I instantly connected with, because like sometimes I feel like I have a snarky sense of humor. And one thing she told Walt kind of stuck with me. So they were in a therapy session, and then Walt said, Hazel, after I die, I would hate to look down at this studio and find everything in a mess. Hazel responded with, what makes you think you won't be using a periscope? Basically insinuating that, he'd be going in the opposite direction. And I mean, when I heard that quote, I lost it.
Wow.
Because I don't feel
fantastic.
that there are many people that had that type of relationship with Walt where they could kind of mess with him like that and he wouldn't instantly be offended. But I think that because of the relationship that he had with her, she could do stuff like that and kind of keep Walt on check outside of the yes, Mr. Disney, yes, Walt that he heard all day, right?
Yeah.
I think another thing that people don't know about her is that she wrote a lot of songs under the pseudonym Gil George for the studio. I think she's penned like 90 different songs for Disney. Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of stuff for the Mickey Mouse Club, for Zorro. She was responsible for the song Talent Roundup. So yeah, I mean, she had so many contributions that I feel were overlooked. And one of the biggest ones that essentially gave Walt, not necessarily the idea, but it really allowed Walt to see himself really building Disneyland, was Hazel was the one that convinced Walt to go to the Chicago Railroad Fair. And that fair is kind of where the structure of Disneyland came from for Walt. So, I mean, the stories that I think she could tell You know, when Walt was in those therapy sessions, he was in one of the most vulnerable states. You know, he could barely move. She was trying to help him. And the stories that I think she'd be able to tell, I think would be unrivaled by many. So Hazel George is my second pick.
That's a good pick. Jeez.
I like how you're going for all the ones that can give you the tea.
A little bit. At least initially.
Yeah.
At least initially.
Oh.
Well, here's why.
That's
You know,
hilarious.
here's the thing. I realized that we hear a lot about the things that made Walt, but to a certain extent, we hear a lot of that in a very filtered format. And we hear and read about the things that were approved for us to read in many ways.
Sure.
And no business that has ever gotten to the level of the Walt Disney Company got to that level from not failing and not having insecurities. And I mean, to be completely honest with you guys, and I guess everybody listening right now, you know, like running the podcast and stuff like that, I have a lot of insecurities about it. You know, I always wonder, like, well, how many people are listening? You know, how many people download it? And at times it can be kind of a mania that takes over you. And so you have to keep yourself on check. And I think having you guys around and having my wife around and having people surrounding me that can keep me on check so that I don't go absolutely crazy, I think is super helpful. But listening to stories from people like Hazel George and all these people that work with him, like Tommy Wilk, almost help ground me in a way that makes me feel that, wow, before they reached that successful plateau, they hit all these other walls that eventually they were able to get past. And so every time that I feel like I hit a wall with something, whether it's designing or editing or whatever the case is, I think back on these types of stories and it helps me move forward. You know, so I draw inspiration from that, not in a way where like I want to hear the tea. Like it's more inspiration, like you can do it. It's like the little engine that could, right? You need that little extra boost to be able to push you through to the next level. So anyway, that's why I would like to talk to them. But anyway.
My second person actually would want to have dinner with this person, not lunch. And you'll find out why.
Okay.
This woman has one of the greatest voices in the park. And she has voiced Maleficent, Lady Tremaine, Leota, and Pele. And I'm talking about Eleanor Audley.
Nice.
Yes, I've been mentioning her a whole lot. I love this woman and what she's done. So, I mean, imagine having that chance to sit down and hear the process of her first thoughts when she knew she was going to be Maleficent. I am so curious. Here goes the rabbit hole. I'm very curious as to how she did that laugh. How many times did she have to get that laugh after she curses Aurora? Like, was there a process? Like, what did you feel? And not just that, but did she do anything to prepare herself for Lady Tremaine, for Pele, for Leota? Like kind of like behind the scenes, because it's more of like inspiration. How did you get there? What did you do? And from a crafting standpoint, when you see something new, you want to learn more about it and what this person did to create this art, you know. Now, the reason I said dinner is because it could be, you know, I want to say river, but no. Let's say Dream Suite. We're having dinner.
Why not?
And we get to watch Fantasmic. How awesome would it be to be sitting with her, watching her character come alive? I mean, who knows? Maybe I don't know. Maybe she knew she was going to be a dragon one day. I don't know. But how awesome would it be to sit down and watch that happen with her?
Oh my God, what if she turned into a dragon while sitting next to you?
It's that kind of a thing. I would fangirl, but I mean, that would be a dream to experience that with her. So yeah,
Oh.
that's why I would want to have dinner.
I agree. It would be very interesting to hear about what her process was like for preparation for something like Leota, because the Haunted Mansion has created so much of what we now envision as a haunted house and the things you might see in it and Halloween in general. Before the Haunted Mansion opened in 1969, I don't know that there were a whole lot of images or representations of heads inside crystal balls. Lots of
Right.
like creepy seances and things like that, but I feel like that was a pretty unique take on the whole idea of a seance, having this disembodied head inside the crystal ball. So I feel like there was no previous territory for her to look back on when she approached that role. So I mean, she really created something iconic in the park and in the world, and and of course those great characters that she voiced as well. But to me, like Leota would be the one that's like nothing like that had been done before ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Not that I'm aware of, anyway.
Yeah. I would like to ask how much of a method actress she was. Because you hear about all these actors in Hollywood that basically become the characters that they're about to portray in an upcoming role. And imagine she's just walking around, going to the grocery store, laughing like Maleficent when, what a crazy thing to think about.
Totally.
Right?
So to ask her something like that would be fantastic. Great choice again.
Thanks.
Oh, it's back to me now,
Yeah,
isn't
back
it?
to you.
It is.
I'm just thinking of Maleficent. Okay, so my next one is actually the individual that I would personally consider my all-time favorite Disney artist.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Not Disney-inspired
Oh,
artist,
got it.
actual Disney artist. I say that with love because all three of us are Disney-inspired artists.
Not yet, at least.
Right? Although Imagineering should definitely be paying us by this point. We've proven that. Yeah, this individual created the look of many of the films in the golden era of Disney animation, most notably Sleeping Beauty. So it's kind of a nice segue from Maleficent.
Nice.
So it's none other than legendary Ivan Earl. And
Ugh.
this man has the most incredible catalog, not just with Disney, but his own portfolio of paintings, all the way through the 1990s. He is the most incredible fantasy landscape artist I have ever come across. He is so amazingly creative and was able to develop a style wholly unto himself. Nobody else painted like Ivan Earl, and you can instantly recognize his work when you see it. And, I've always had an affinity for landscape, and I've always loved trees and things like that. And he nails all of that. And I don't know, for me, it's just one of those artist dreams to be able to speak with a legendary artist and just hear their thoughts on how they approach art, kind of like what Melissa was saying about approaching an acting role. The same thing, like, how did you approach this painting? Like, what was your process? Where did you come up with this insane idea for this look for Sleeping Beauty? And do you realize how much of a genius you are? That's what I would fanboy over that. So yeah, just to kind of absorb some of the knowledge of a talent like that, and a truly inspiring artist that is, to me, unrivaled in the Disney canon. And that's saying something, because there are some titanic artists within the company that are supremely talented on the very highest level, and just to me he's tops. So I would love to eat lunch with Ivan Earl, or dinner, or breakfast.
Yeah.
Or snacks.
Or snack
Or
time.
snacks, or just walk around everywhere talking to him.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think with so many of the original artists, you have an opportunity to level up in a way that you just couldn't by reading a book or going to just any class or school or anything, right? Because when you think of a dude like Andreas Deja, for instance, like he worked under these artists as well, and look what he accomplished. Like every single one of these artists had an apprentice, so to speak. And so I can only imagine, like your work already is on a scale of 1 to 10, like a freaking 24. So I can only imagine like where you would be if you worked under the tutelage of an Ivan Earl.
Yeah, it would be something else, I tell you that much. You know, it reminds me, did you ever see, there was a film that I believe was an episode of one of the Disney television shows back
where he goes to paint the tree?
Yeah, where him and I think it's Mark Davis and there's 4 of them. They all go and paint this. They all go out into a field somewhere and they pick this cool, like gnarly tree with, you know, an interesting shape, and they all paint it and they all give their own take on how to paint a tree. I love that show. I don't remember what it's called, but if you can find it, it's so worth watching. If you have any interest in art whatsoever, it is a fascinating look at different approaches, and all 4 of the people that do it are just supreme masters at their craft. So it's amazing.
I'm pretty sure that it was just called 4 Artists Paint One Tree.
I think that's what it is. Yeah, that sounds right.
Like part of the adventure and art series that they were doing in the late 50s.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
Yeah, I'm going to try to find that video. I'm sure it's floating around on YouTube. I'll try to find it, and I'll put it in the blog post, podketeers.com/262. It's just fascinating, the different takes on this one tree, but each take is so the style of each one of these artists that you've become familiar with. So, yeah. Okay, now I want to watch that again. Okay. So excited. Okay. So, my next selection is more to quench my thirst for knowledge when it comes to the Disney company.
Oh, I bet I know who this is.
I bet you do too. He was the chief archivist at the Disney company. And yeah, I think I would just... And look, there's books that this gentleman has written that have a lot of questions. He had the Ask Dave column for such a long time. And there was nothing that you could not ask him that he did not have an answer for. He was basically the internet of the Disney company before there was an internet and even into the internet. And that is none other than Disney legend Dave Smith. I feel like Dave Smith has heard every question a multiple amount of times. You know, anything that you can ask. But I think that if there were times that I heard interviews with him, and this is, I think, one of the things that really bugs me, that, you know, I was in the process of trying to reach out to get him on the podcast at one point. And unfortunately, you know, when he passed away, I realized we were never going to have that opportunity to sit down and chat with him. There's just so much that I feel like I would have wanted to ask him, and it just makes me wonder how much of that did he take with him? You know, because there's books, there's the magazines. Obviously, thanks to him, we have the Disney archive. I mean, who has the sense to think, look, you're building something here, you should archive this, you should really have a tangible record of all the things that you've been doing so that one day you can look back and see what you've accomplished. And it's not something people normally think about. You know, maybe some people will keep a journal, some people might chronicle what's happening in photographs, but the fact that he had the foresight to archive and tag and really catalog every single piece of Disney history, from the studio to the buildings to the books that have been printed, everything, letters between Walt and people that he interacted with, and there's so much, you know. And I think if I ever had the opportunity to just freely go into the Disney archives, I feel like we would have a very similar feeling to what we felt when we went to Galaxy's Edge, where you're just overtaken by everything that's there, right? You have that sensory overload that we talked about. But sitting down with Dave, I'm sure that I would have the opportunity to not just ask him a question, but to ask him those follow-up questions that I feel we don't get answers to, because sometimes you read these books and these questions or D23 interviews and you get the question, you get a straight answer, but what if you have 3 or 4 other questions as a follow-up? You never got a chance to ask those. And I think that's where that conversation would generally lead to. Like, I would start with a list of, so in this issue you said this and this about this. I'd like to follow up with 5 questions about that. And I'm sure he would have 5 answers for that, you know. So Dave Smith. Dave Smith would be my next choice.
He probably is the person who had the greatest individual knowledge of the Disney company, probably head and shoulders above anybody else.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Easily.
not even close. Like that. Yeah, it was. I had the same question when he passed away. Is how much knowledge did he take with him? You know, like, I know he endeavored for basically his entire career to get all of that knowledge recorded, but so much knowledge is anecdotal and experiential, and he was around for so many decades, involved in so many things that, it's one of that kind of generation's last remaining, you know, true personal, like, knowledge bases that existed until recently. And there's not many of that original guard left, you know, and it's sad, but they all have left such incredible legacies. And I hope that he is always remembered amongst the most important people within the company, because we wouldn't have so much of the things that we have, you know, amazing books and histories and, you know, things that, you know, like a lot of people that write biographies of Disney or histories of the park, they ask for access to the archives, and if they're granted that, that's like their main resource for research, because it's all there in one central place. It's truly incredible what he created.
But think about that. Things like D23 may not have even existed if that thirst for knowledge wasn't there.
Right.
Right? Because D23 magazine and all these other things that have been around over the years came from Disney fanatics like us, just wanting to ask more and gain more knowledge about what's happening behind the scenes. And, you know, that I feel like those were all inspired by the creation of the archive and Dave's answers to questions, you know, monthly or weekly or daily or every minute. If I was around, he would hate me. I just realized that. I would just bother him by asking him so many questions. Oh, I would apologize to him every day.
Man. How do I top that? It's like, oh, it's so heartfelt. That's a good choice.
Thank you.
It's a really good choice. Just to pick his brain.
Right.
What a So my third choice is another voice in the park, and we all know his voice. And it's Thurl Ravenscroft. And I think I could probably just not even talk and just listen to this guy's voice if you weren't sure who he is. He is one of the Singing Busts, or Tony the Tiger, but right now we're sticking in Haunted Mansion, and he's actually one of the pirates. Just that voice is so unique. Again, I would pick his brain, and I would love to know if he even thought or wondered if Yo-Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me, or Grim Grinning Ghosts would be such hits, 50 years later.
Mm-hmm.
To get that chance to ask him, like, look at what it's done, look at us, look at what this has become. Like, this would be amazing. And I would love to hear his thoughts, his insights. If he had to get into character for a singing bust, I mean, because you see that he's, acting out.
Oh yeah.
So it's
he's
like, what
playing
did
the
you
part.
do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, again, like I said, I let him talk and ramble, and I'd be like listening because it's a singing bus talking to me.
Yeah. Just to hear the tone of his voice.
Yeah.
Just right in front of you would be mind blowing. Just
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah. It'd be like like if you had James Earl Jones and him like across the table from each
Right?
other. And you're just like, I can't even.
Oh man. It's yeah.
Wait, did you actually say his name?
Yeah.
You did?
I did.
Okay.
In the beginning.
Okay.
But I think we just kind of just went right into it because I was just so excited
Okay.
to just talk
I
about
would've
him.
been too.
You started describing, and I just immediately started thinking of all the cool things. So I missed you saying that.
Yeah.
That's
It's so
fantastic.
funny. As soon as you said the singing bus, the next thing I heard in my head was, they're great. And then you said Tony the Tiger. And then the next thing I heard was, you're a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
Yes.
I was like,
Oh my gosh, how did I forget
so
that?
So much. Like, it makes me wonder, what if he sang songs for all the villains? Like, imagine if Maleficent had Europe, like a Mr. Grinch style song for her. You know what I mean? That'd be crazy.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Oh, imagine if he sang "Friends on the Other Side."
Jeez. And that's a long leap too from
Nice.
being Fritz. Is it Fritz that he is in the tiki room? I forgot which bird he is. I think
yes.
he's
I'm
Fritz.
having a brain
Yes,
fart.
he's Fritz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, so good. Yeah.
Excellent pick. So we're on to number 4 here. I am sticking with the artist category for this pick.
Okay.
And this is one of the most interesting and standalone artists within the Disney company. Played a similar role to Ivan Earl and was basically an artist that developed the look and the concepts, the color palettes, the moods, and the general sense of many of the films of the 50s and 60s, and then went on to create absolute magic for the World's Fair and the parks. And that is none other than the amazing Mary Blair.
Oh, great
Oh, boy.
choice.
Mary Blair, to me, encapsulates mid-century artistry and creativity and inventiveness better than anybody else within the Disney company. And her work on It's a Small World for the New York World's Fair and the other artistic elements that she did for the parks, the murals in Tomorrowland and the contemporary in Walt Disney World. These are such iconic, vast, epic, amazing pieces that, most of which are intact today, some of which are not, very sadly. But her artistry really knew no bounds. And I really enjoy going back to her work time and time again. I wish that the concept art that she did for films like Cinderella and even Alice in Wonderland would have been more utilized in those films.
Yeah.
Those are both fairly stylized films, but they kind of started to create a problem that Walt eventually identified, in that he was employing these incredible artists such as Mary Blair and Ivan Earl, and they were creating incredible art to inspire the animators, but none of that actual style was making it onto the screen. And Walt lamented that, and eventually with Sleeping Beauty, he said, you guys are going to just put Ivan Earl's art on the screen. Like, none of this, like, watering it down with, cartooniness. You're going to put his artwork on the screen.
Yeah.
I wish that had happened with Mary Blair, especially with, I think, Cinderella. Maybe even Peter Pan. Like, those two films, the artwork she did for them was just so whimsical and beautiful. I don't know. I just love her approach and her view of the world that you can see through her artistry. And, she worked very closely with Walt. By many accounts, she was Walt's favorite artist. And she got to travel with Walt and El Grupo as they went through South America on their tour. And I'm sure there are many wonderful tales of that adventure. So yeah, I love everything that she did. She was a pioneer in her day as a female in that industry. And yeah, I adore her.
Yeah. On the plus side, at least if you want to see the art from Cinderella that she created, they did make those children's books out of them. So
That's
you
true.
do have the opportunity to still go through all the concept art because you basically told the story, in her style as they were concepting this entire film. So
Yes.
you may not get it as part of the actual film, but if you get the book, you see exactly what you're talking about. Like she
Yeah.
has this very fluid way of drawing that just you get so much detail, but the fluidity in just her strokes is just amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
And plus, she
She's
gave us a 5-legged
incredible.
goat.
Word.
That's true.
Word.
Yeah.
Also, and I haven't been yet, but I'm going in, I believe, 2 weekends. Currently at the Hilbert Museum in Orange County, they have a Mary Blair exhibit that runs through October. So Disney fans in the area, make sure you make the effort to make it over there and check it out. I believe it also is happening in conjunction with a Norman Rockwell exhibit.
Nice.
So lots of amazing American art on display currently.
Cool. We'll pull the information for that exhibit and we'll put it in the blog post for the episode, podketeers.com/262, if you want to check that out, because anytime you get a chance to see any artist that you admire on display like that, it's great. I mean, that's why I wish we were closer to the Walt Disney Family Museum.
Sure. Well, I'll be prepared with a review of that exhibit after I go see it.
Right on. I'm looking forward to that.
Cool.
Okay. So I don't know who to say next because I admire both of these people a lot. But I feel like everyone that I've chosen isn't with us anymore. And I feel like I would want to at least choose one that's still with... No, you know what? I'm going to go with this one, and then I'll cap it off after. If we do one
there
more
you go.
round. So, okay. So the next person that I'm going to select recently has played a big role in how I've been shifting my mindset about doing things. And the reason for that is because I feel like he was one of the people that was very instrumental in how Imagineering became Imagineering, because he shared a vision with Walt and shared a vision in how you can find and extract talents from people that others don't necessarily acknowledge are there. And I think in the business world that we live in today, when people go out for jobs, I know a lot of people, and I feel like I've been in these situations myself where I feel like I'm a great fit for something, or I know somebody that's a great fit for something, but because they don't have, a degree in something, they don't get the job, or they're not allowed to do that because it's not in the spectrum of the stuff that they do, but Marty Sklar, was one of those people that just could find those talents the same way that Walt would, and would place you in an avenue that he knew that you would succeed. And I think because he had such a similar mindset to Walt is why he and Walt became such good friends over time, and people dubbed Marty the Sorcerer's Apprentice. And reading One Little Spark and Dream It, Do It, there's a lot that I feel that I'm learning from Marty, that I feel like I just have follow-up questions that I want to ask him. And the times that I had the opportunity to actually meet him in person, like I think back on those opportunities now, and I don't know, man. I just feel like as a fan, I geeked out, right, meeting them.
Yeah.
But now I think back and I think, why didn't I read this before? Why didn't I have this knowledge before where I could have asked him? But then I try to check myself and I think, but would my mindset have been the same back then? Because I'm not in the situations where I am now trying to build something or trying to make this work. Like, it's all situational. And because of that, I don't know. I just would love to sit down with Marty and just talk to him, because I also feel that not only would he be able to share this knowledge that I think would help me structure things that I want to do and achieve, but at the same time, I feel that he would give me a sense of compassion that I feel is generally missing from things that we do, at our jobs or in life sometimes. And, knowing the type of person that Marty was, he was very, from what I've heard, he was a hard worker and very strict when it came to getting stuff done, but he was a very compassionate person. And I think that's missing in a lot of people these days. So to sit down and just pick Marty's brain, yeah.
All the feels, man. Seriously. That would be really epic to sit down with him.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, awesome pick.
Thank you.
So this person, I don't necessarily want to have lunch. I would love to have tea. And
you're very specific with these.
I know. It's because, okay, I would love to sit down with Lillian.
Oh.
Okay.
So that's why I would think tea would be a little bit more
appropriate.
Yeah.
I feel you.
So to have that chance to sit down with her and kind of, I would love to compare her experience following up before Disneyland opened. And that would be one thing, is to compare. I know it's not the same. I've camped out for many of Disneyland's events. So to hear what her side would be like coming up the day that it was going to open, and then I would like tell her, hey, will this happen, for the 60th and whatnot. Kind of like talk to her about that and kind of get some insight. But what I would love to hear too is when she decided on Mickey's name. And that moment of how she's seen that happen all the way up to Disneyland, just hearing from her perspective, I think it'd be really different, really unique. And her influence on Club 33. Just her style, her input, what she's done, and of course, what led up to the purchase of the petrified tree, because I'm curious too. But I think it would be like one of those experiences where it would just be pretty whimsical and dainty and just a different energy. I feel like I would get that from her.
Oh my God.
So,
imagine starting off taking the Lily Bell around the park.
Yes, please.
Getting off in New Orleans Square and walking to Club 33 for tea with Lillian.
Sold.
And it technically fits. And it technically fits what I was talking about at the beginning too, because before she was Lillian Disney, she was Lillian Bounds, Walt's first secretary. So I'm just saying.
Full circle.
Full circle.
Full circle.
Just like
Grand
the
Circle
Disneyland
Tour
Railroad.
of the Magic Kingdom.
Wow.
That's a great choice.
Yeah, that would be cool because, I feel like from his family, we've heard the most from his daughters, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And, children often have a very different view of a person than their spouse. So I think you would get a perspective that I don't feel like we've heard a lot from with that choice. So, yeah, that could be very interesting.
All right, let's set this one up. Can we? Time machine time?
Yeah. Right?
We're going to need a lot of time machines.
We are. We're going to need a lot of those pin particles.
Yeah, exactly.
Gavin, he glossed over.
No,
I don't know.
It took a half second, but I'm there with you. I got it. Marvel nerd. Okay, so my last choice is... So I talked about Joe Rohde, who I feel like is kind of still in the current generation of Imagineering. So I'm going back to the just previous era of Imagineering, to an individual who has created so many of my very favorite and most iconic attractions throughout the parks. And that's none other than Hazen's new friend, Tony Baxter, the man, the myth, the legend.
I wish so hard for that to be true.
I mean, Tony in recent years has been named a Disney legend. He's gotten his window on Main Street. The guy is solidly in the, to me, like the Mount Rushmore of Disney Imagineering. The work that he brought us in basically creating the Disney mountain range.
Yeah.
Post Matterhorn with Big Thunder and Splash. I love his approach to attractions and the storytelling within. And to me, as amazingly immersive and textured and detailed the things that Joe Rohde creates are, Tony brings that Disney romanticism and magic, kind of like I discussed with Haley Mills at the beginning of our discussion.
Yeah.
The things that Tony led, the projects that he led, to me just imbue that Disney spirit. They really have a fun, imaginative storytelling core, and the artistry involved in them are, filled with whimsy. Obviously, the revamping of Fantasyland in 1983 and Big Thunder and Splash, like I mentioned, and then probably what he would consider his crowning achievement was being the creative lead on Euro Disney, which later became Disneyland Paris. I mean, come on. It's hard to top, the things that he was able to bring us. And I feel like he's got a kind of a jolly, jovial, warm spirit about him when he talks. And I think he would have so many great stories to tell. He loves telling stories because he's on like every documentary and video that he makes. So he loves telling stories. I love the stories of his early days that he always retells about being an ice cream scooper at the park and being able to like duck his head into some back door in Pirates of the Caribbean, and Imagineers like inviting him in to like test the ride before it was open. And I mean, just he's been on a Disney adventure since the 60s, and I would love to hear every moment of it. I keep hoping he's going to give us an autobiography at some point.
Oh my God, that would be so fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh,
totally.
That would just thinking about it, I got goosebumps.
Right?
Oh.
Yeah.
He's the next big one I want a biography from.
Yeah.
Agreed. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can you ask him some indie stories for me?
Of course. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I think it would be great for us to ask him that, because I'm just going to take this opportunity and just say, Tony, join us on Podketeers.
Yes.
Let's just sit down and chat. And one of the next episodes should be a chat with Tony Baxter.
Heck yes.
Just throwing it down. I think it would be awesome.
Send that out to the universe.
Yeah.
Send it out.
So if anybody knows Tony Baxter, I'd love to get an opportunity for us to sit down and talk with him and just chat about his life and his inspirations and everything that he's accomplished. Because, Tony and I actually share something in common. We both went to Cal Poly Pomona.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
For his senior thesis, he actually made a Mary Poppins attraction, which he was able to show somebody at WED, which is kind of how he got into that circle and started working on stuff there. So, so cool. I love it.
And the fact that there's still not a Mary Poppins attraction is atrocious. We need Cherry Tree Lane to come to Main Street. It's got to happen.
We should come up with a word like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious that means the complete opposite. So it should be like superfrumpalicious. You know what I mean? Like, we should come up with our own word and then put it on a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Hashtag it.
Cool, man.
Oh.
Well, Tony was one of the two people I was debating to talk about before I went with Marty.
Nice.
So I'm going to go with my next person on the list, and that is Floyd Norman.
Ooh,
Nice.
good pick.
Yeah, Floyd Norman, aside from being just an amazingly talented artist, holds a really unique place in Disney history, especially at the studio, as the first African-American animator that was employed by the Disney company. So his take and his experiences, I think, are absolutely unique to anybody there outside of the Ink and Paint girls, and maybe like Mary Blair's experiences, working with Wed and with Walt and stuff. So I just, there's so many things I want to ask him as far as like how things were in the studio, how he was received, what were the types of things that were hardest for him, to mesh with and work with, and maybe a little bit of tea on this one and just be like, who was the hardest to work with, and then when he left the company and started making videos on his own, there's just so much that I would want to sit down and ask him, that I think it would just be a fascinating afternoon to sit down with Floyd. And he's such a witty guy. He's got these wisecracks, man, that just, he does not care about letting loose. That's the other thing. That he's just so
awesome.
Honest that if there's something that he feels passionate about, he will make that known. He will not hold back. And that's one of the things that I really admire about Floyd. So if I ever had an opportunity, I guess that's another invitation that I'm extending out now officially into the universe.
Yeah.
I would love an opportunity for us to sit down and chat with Floyd Norman.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
fantastic pick. Very good.
Mel, do you have any more?
Nope,
No?
that was it.
She's out. All right. Well, you've got a couple left, don't you, Hazen? You want to do some honorable mentions just real quick? Because I've got one more that I'll give an honorable mention to.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll wrap it up with one. I guess I could do a couple more, but there's one really that I think I just want to kind of punctuate with.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just do one more. How about that?
Okay, let's just do
Perfect.
one more then. So this person was very close, and I think it was on my list purely out of intrigue and a slight desire for some tea as well, which has been a common theme tonight.
The Mad Hatter.
I would kind of love the chance to sit down with Michael Eisner.
Ooh, great choice.
Wow.
The lightning rod character of all time within the Disney company. I feel like he is easily the most controversial, one of the most influential, one of the people who truly changed the landscape of Disney the world over. And I would just love to hear his thoughts on all of it. Even with some perspective, many years on now, okay, looking back, what are your thoughts? I would love to hear some firsthand accounts of, his early days, his fall from grace, all of it.
Official invitation?
Heck yeah.
Official invitation out into the universe. Michael Eisner, let's chat.
It'll be interesting, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, heck
Yeah.
yeah. I would love to hear a lot because, we've said it before, in a lot of ways, there was some vilification that happened. May or may not be justified. I don't know all the details, but
Right.
he did a lot of positive things for the company as well. Gave us a lot of expansion and growth that we wouldn't have today if it wasn't for the things that he endeavored to do. Did he get a little too ambitious? Probably so. But without that ambition, there's a lot of things we wouldn't have at all.
Yeah.
True.
Agreed. That's a great choice, man. And I got to tell you that it wraps up my final one quite nicely. Because to punctuate everything, I would love to sit down and talk with Bob Iger.
Of course.
Bob Iger is definitely on my bucket list of cast members at Disney that I would just love to sit down and chat with and just pick his brain. Because Bob Iger isn't just a Disney fan, isn't just a Marvel fan, isn't just a Pixar fan. He has this business acumen that not many people have, and to have the foresight to take these companies and build what has been built from them. In many cases, I feel like a lot of those got to the next level. Some of them may have been in trouble and they may have needed a little bit of help, but just from where he started at ESPN and where he is now, I feel like there's a lot that I could learn from Bob Iger and just the stories that he could tell. And again, and this is obviously asking for a lot, but the opportunity to hear the stories firsthand of those times that, he just felt vulnerable about some decision that he had to make, or a big acquisition, or something that he felt was going wrong, and just how he dealt with all of that. Because it's always interesting to me how people deal with these things that stress them out on a daily basis. And everything all the successes are awesome, and they're feathers in everybody's hat, but how you deal with all of the failures is essentially how you move up to that next level, right? And I feel that not only has he had his own failures that he's had to deal with, not many, obviously, as we've seen historically, but, there's been a couple things that may not have been well received, but overall, he had to clean up a lot of what happened with, not just with Michael Eisner, but with other companies that may have been mismanaged. And so as Disney began to bring all these entities in under the Disney umbrella, I understand that he assigns people, or people are put into positions that handle those things, but, regardless, they all roll up to him. And so he has to ultimately deal with all of that because he has to answer to shareholders. And so I think it would be fascinating to sit down and just have a candid talk about what it's like running a multi-billion-dollar company, and more importantly, how he deals with it as a person, on a daily basis. Wow. Bob Iger, official invitation.
Yeah.
Putting the gauntlet down on that one too. That one feels more like a pipe dream right now.
Yeah.
More than anything. Yeah. But dude, ultimate bucket list item. Get a chance to sit down and chat with Bob Iger.
Nice.
You never know.
Cool.
So there you go. All right. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed the lists that we have compiled as far as who we'd like to sit down and have some food with, or some tea, or some breakfast, or some lunch or dinner, or some snacks around the park. If you came up with any that maybe we didn't talk about, we'd love for you to join the conversation and share those people with us. You can search for Podketeers on Instagram, Twitter, or on Facebook. You can also leave a comment on the blog post for this episode at podketeers.com/262. We'd love to hear all the people that you came up with and why you would like to sit with them and just share a drink or share a meal with them. All right, well, before we wrap up the podcast, I know we mentioned the FGP Squad just a short while ago. If you are unable to join the FGP Squad, but you still like what you hear and you like to help out the podcast, we have a really great way for you to help, and that's by using our Amazon link. You can find the big Amazon button by going to podketeers.com/Amazon. Click it. It'll take you to Amazon, and anything that you purchase may earn us a small commission as a thank you from Amazon, because we were like, hey, use our Amazon link, and then you did, and then Amazon's like, hey, thanks for using the Podketeers link. And every time that you do that, again, we get a small commission as a thank you from Amazon. So to everybody that's taking just a few extra seconds to start their Amazon purchase by going to podketeers.com/Amazon and clicking on that big old button, we just want to say thank you. because it certainly helps, and we appreciate you going through those motions. All right, anything before we wrap this burrito up and eat it?
Who gets
Nope.
to use the time machine first for these lunch dates?
Well, I mean,
Oh.
considering that I know about the pin particle technology the most, I
Got
think
it.
it would be best for me to test it
Okay.
and use it. It'll only
Okay.
feel like I'm gone for 5 minutes,
That's fine.
and then we can make suits for all of us, and we
Okay.
can just go to all the points in time and then reconvene and talk about how we collected the Infinity Stones and who we talked to.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll follow up.
Perfect.
All right.
That sounds like a plan.
Just nobody snap their fingers. Just
No.
That's the
That is
one
not
rule.
allowed. That's not allowed.
No finger snapping.
Okay, so that is going to wrap it up for this episode. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep moving forward, and always remember to pass on the magic. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Made you look.